In this chapter, we're going to find out how all of the stuff from the story time chapter is even possible. And we're going to take a closer look at the impact of beliefs, the impact that your beliefs have on your physiology and your health. When it comes to your health and wellness, your beliefs can be your biggest ally or your biggest enemy. Imagine your DNA, the genetic code that you're born with, as a book. The book contains every single instruction for who you are, from your eye color to the way your cells function. The book doesn't change, the words within the book are fixed. Your DNA plays a key role in health and disease and influences conditions like cancer, mental disorders, and immune responses. And many people live in constant fear that someday their genes are going to turn on them. So they wait for the cancer to explode in their lives, just as it exploded in the life of their mother or brother or sister or aunt or uncle. Now, this is the interesting part. Our inherited DNA is not fixed, so our genes are not destiny. And epigenetics is the study of how our genes are turned on or off without changing the DNA sequence itself. It basically means that our gene expression, which part of the DNA code is activated, is influenced by the environment and our lifestyle. Even if you have a predisposition for cancer, it's just a part of the information that's contained in the book of your DNA, but the gene expression is the most important part. When a gene product is needed, a signal from its environment and not an emergent property of the gene itself activates expression of that gene. In other words, when it comes to genetic control, it's the environment, stupid. It's wonderfully put by Bruce Lipton. And in the last decade, epigenetic research has established that DNA blueprints passed down through genes are not set in concrete at birth. Genes are not destiny. Environmental influences, including nutrition, stress, and emotions, can modify those genes without changing the basic blueprint of the DNA code. And those modifications epigeneticists have discovered can be passed down to future generations as surely as DNA blueprints are passed on via the double helix. We have a couple of studies that confirm the passing down to future generations from 2001, 2006, and 2010. And through the science of epigenetics, we now know that it's not the gene that creates disease, but the environment that programs our genes to create disease. The environment of our body is heavily influenced by our emotions. Emotions can cause a downregulation in a healthy gene expression, which can activate a wide range of diseases based on your DNA. So, beliefs and emotions are the main drivers for the creation of an environment for healthy gene expression. When we're talking about the environment, we're not just saying like pollution, air, water, food and stuff, but like the internal environment of the body itself. How does this work? Emotion is one of the building blocks of beliefs. Emotions that we can feel can be seen as chemical feedback for what we believe in. They're the end product of our thoughts, actions, and experiences, and they're defined by our beliefs. I think I have an example. Yeah. If you believe that the world is a supportive and kind place versus if you believe that the world is a threatening and dangerous place, the emotions that you feel when you step out into the world are going to be different depending on what you believe in. This is also connected to the examples that we had in chapter 1. Like person A and person B dealing with a sudden change or a challenge, and the way that you perceive the challenge, if you see it as an opportunity versus if you see it as an unsurmountable obstacle, the way that you feel about it is going to be significantly different, and that's going to cause a different environment in your body. Most importantly, your beliefs define what is stressful to you and how you deal with stressful situations. This is super important because, as we're going to find out, stress plays a major role in the environment of the body and the gene expression. So our emotions have the power to change the internal chemistry of the body. They have a powerful effect on the body's internal chemistry because emotions trigger the release of specific hormones and neurotransmitters, which influence how we feel physically. Therefore, you can also think of emotion as energy in motion. Now, how you deal with what you perceive as stressful situations is defined by your beliefs. Having the belief that a certain situation is negative or bad can lead to mismanaged, prolonged, or repressed emotions such as fear, anger, aggression, despair, hopelessness, which can create a state of chronic stress. And chronic stress has a serious effect on our health. Serious would be downplaying it, because when we feel stressed, anxious, or our brain perceives a threat, the body's natural protection mechanism, the sympathetic nervous system, is turned on. And this is our fight or flight response, and it releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. What happens is the body mobilizes a great amount of energy and prepares for action as a response to the stress and to the threat that you perceive. What happens? The sympathetic nervous system changes your biochemistry, your pupils dilate, your heart rate increases, your digestive processes are inhibited, they stop, because when you're under threat, it's not super important that you digest your food. It's more important that you run away from the threat or to fight it. The blood vessels get constricted, the muscles get tightened, your sweating is increased, your blood sugar levels are increased, and your energy stores are activated. All of it happens with the aim of getting you to the best possible state of being able to handle the threat. In short, more energy is made available to deal with the threat. The body moves out of balance. That's exactly what stress is. You can see the guy dancing as a reaction to the stress that he perceived. But don't be worried. This is a healthy and a natural response, and it helps you in situations when you need to think or act quickly. And when the event is over, the body normally returns to balance within hours. Now, all of us are built with for dealing with short-term bursts of stress. Exercise is one example of stress that enhances health and strengthens the body. The problems arise when the stress doesn't end within hours and the body never returns to balance. And in truth, no organism in nature can endure living in emergency mode for extended periods of time without consequences. Think of an antelope in Africa running away from a lioness, and when she escapes, when she's running away from the lioness, you can't we can't imagine, but we can presume that the stress levels are off the charts. Like the antelope's life is in danger, and she's mobilizing all of the energy the antelope has to run away from the threat. But when she escapes the lioness, she has like a time period of calming down. There's even some twitching of the muscles. The antelope is shaking off the stress that was perceived, and within that time frame, the antelope's body returns back to balance. Same with humans. Like if a tiger attacks you, all of your energy is mobilized. You run away or you fight off the tiger. You kill the tiger. And then within a couple of hours, the body returns back to balance and everything is perfect. Yeah, and you're stronger for it, because what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, yeah? But here's the problem. Today, most of the stresses that we're experiencing are not in the form of real threats that we can easily identify, respond to, and move on. There's no tigers that are chasing us in the jungle. But we are constantly under threat by multitudes of worries about our personal lives, our jobs, and even our war-torn global community. And just one phone call or email from our boss or family member that elicits a strong emotional reaction can be perceived as a threat and elicit a stress response. We don't need tigers anymore, like our family, our family and our jobs are enough. And such worries do not threaten our immediate survival, but our emotions nevertheless activate the sympathetic nervous system, which results in a chronically elevated stress hormones. The funny thing is the sympathetic nervous system activates whether the threat is real or imagined, and just thoughts and images of unresolved emotional situations from your past are often enough to cause very real stress with a corresponding response in the body. That means just when you think about a past experience that was stressful to you, if you didn't move beyond it and you didn't process the event in a constructive way, that's enough for your sympathetic nervous system to get activated. An extreme example of this is war veterans dealing with PTSD and recurring images of traumatic situations that they witnessed. Even though this is only in the mind, the same protection mechanism kicks in as a response. And even if we're not aware of it, but almost all of us have a subconsciousness, which, as we remember, records everything that ever happened in our lives. It's filled with painful memories, hurtful scenes, unresolved emotions, and situations from the past that are bubbling under the surface and that we can't let go of. As a result, many of us spend the majority of our time in a state of heightened arousal or a state of survival mode. The stress hormones keep pumping through the body because the threats never seem to go away, and the stress response becomes chronic. A chronic stress response is associated with, I think, probably all possible diseases that we can think of. And here are some examples: cardiovascular issues, immune system deregulation, digestive issues, vitamin deficiencies, deregulated immune system, we have that, sleep disturbances, muscle tension and pain, metabolic changes in the forms of insulin resistance, weight gain, and increased risk of type 2 diabetes, depletion of happiness hormones, serotonin, dopamine, mental health issues in the form of anxiety, depression, and mood disbalances, impaired cognitive function, difficulties with concentration, memory, and decision making, sexual dysfunction, decrease in lifespan. Chronic stress causes us to age more quickly. Even people in your lives that experienced an incredibly stressful situation, they basically their hair turned gray overnight. And even with cancer, it's connected even with cancer. And I mean, not to say that I experienced some of the more extreme stuff on this spectrum, but when I take a look at the list and when you compare it with the context session, I was probably a walking example of how things can go wrong when your sympathetic nervous system is chronically activated, minus the most extreme situations. Thank you, God. But it's not to be underestimated. This thing, it wrecks lives. Here are some more examples. Brain incoherence, and when your brain is aroused and you're living in survival mode, you keep shifting your attention to your job, news, ex, friends, email, social media. You're doing all of this incredibly fast because you're in survival mode and you're activating each of these different neurological networks very quickly. And over time, what happens, the act of habitually narrowing your focus and shifting your attention compartmentalizes your brain, and it no longer works in a balanced fashion. When that happens, you're training your brain to fire in a disordered, incoherent pattern, which causes it to work inefficiently. It basically causes difficulties thinking straight and thinking coherently. When your brain gets incoherent, you get incoherent, and when your brain isn't working optimally, you're not working optimally. We also have reduced intelligence, even a couple of studies from 2003, 98, 96, because the circulation moves out of the forebrain and goes back to the hindbrain. So we have less capacity to think creatively and instead rely more on our instincts to instantly react. This leads to diminished conscious awareness and reduced intelligence, and teachers can see it, as an example, teachers can see it in students that have exam stress and that don't test well. I mean, this is even like a small thing, but when you're in the state of constant arousal and survival mode, even when you're walking down the street, like your eyes are constantly scanning the people that are walking by, because subconsciously you might be looking out for a threat. We even have, I mean, as you can presume through the concept of neurogenesis, physical changes, because the overstimulation of cortisol is directly linked to significant damage and long-lasting functional changes in the brain. Studies have found that chronic stress-related illnesses are associated with a change in the volume of the brain's gray and white matter, the region of the hippocampus associated with memory and emotions shrinks. Now, these observed brain alterations are believed to contribute to the creation of hardwired, stress-linked pathways that result in a vicious behavioral cycle of maintaining a constant fight or flight state of mind. And it's the example that we had with certain neurological pathways becoming ingrained. It becomes the most efficient way of your brain to function. Children who develop chronic stress behaviors are more likely to experience learning impairments and psychological dysfunctions such as anxiety and mood disorders later in life. Study done in 2014. And this is just something to consider and to keep in the back of your minds. I mean, as a parent, we should be doing our very best to minimize the stressful situations that our kids have to endure. Not all stress is bad. A lot of it is like really positive stress, but not to like shovel on stress that isn't necessary and that causes them to deal with it improperly. Almost every major illness that people acquire has been linked to chronic stress. 5, 6 studies, 8 studies, between 75 and 90% of all visits to the doctor have stress as a major contributing factor. Stress, up to 90% of all doctor visits, stress. In addition to all of this, an environment within your body is created that impacts the expression of your genes negatively. Genes for diseases that you have a predisposition for are activated or upregulated, and genes for health, vitality, and longevity are deactivated and downregulated. This is the gene expression that we talked about. Basically, your gene expression takes a turn for the worse, and the stuff that you had a predisposition for, like all the diseases in your book of DNA, get activated and get expressed instead of the genes for health and longevity. In simple words, through perceived stress and associated emotions, we go from a state of ease and we enter a state of dis-ease. If you never thought about this play on words, it blew my mind when I discovered it. And the chronically elevated sympathetic nervous system can be defined as dis-ease, like as the literal understanding of disease. Not only that, but we can also get addicted to our emotions, because based on our beliefs, we react to situations from our external environment in a way that produces an emotion. And the resulting internal chemistry signals our genes to either turn on and increase the expression of the gene, or to turn off and decrease the expression of the gene. Here's the thing. If you're living by the same beliefs that produce the same emotions day in and day out, your body believes it's in the same environmental conditions. Those feelings, like the feelings that result from your current set of beliefs, influence you to make the same choices, causing you to demonstrate the same habits, and then create the same experiences that then reinforce the beliefs and produce the same emotions all over again. You're stuck in a hamster's like wheel that you can't get out of, because the things that you believe in are causing you to think, feel, and act in the same way that you do every day, and that results in the same, that leads to the same results, which then again confirms the beliefs, causing you to act in that way all over again. Thanks to these programs, your cells are constantly being exposed to the same chemical environment. That chemistry keeps signaling the same genes in the same way, and so you're stuck, because when you stay the same, your genetic expression stays the same. And now you're headed for your genetic destiny because you don't have any new information coming from the environment. The brain has a principle called neuroplasticity. We mentioned this a couple of times. It means the more we use certain neural pathways, the stronger they become. Each time you experience a negative emotion, your brain fires a specific set of neurons and releases specific chemicals associated with that emotion. So people can become addicted to emotions like fear, anxiety, anger, sadness, because the brain gets used to the strong chemical reactions that these emotions create. Even though the emotions can feel unpleasant, there are still very powerful chemicals that affect the brain in a way that can feel familiar, predictable, and even comforting over time. For example, when cortisol or adrenaline levels drop, the brain might interpret that absence as a lack of stimulation and as a kind of withdrawal, leading us to seek out the experiences that bring them back. It may unconsciously create situations or behaviors that trigger them. It becomes a familiar state, and we begin to expect and even seek that emotional rush as part of the routine. I'm sure you have people in your lives that are constantly seeking for the stress, and this is the example. If someone is used to feeling stressed, they might unconsciously seek out stressful situations, engage in arguments, dwell on negative memories, or fixate on worries to trigger emotions like anger or frustration, just to keep the brain in its familiar chemical state. This strengthens the neural pathways, so it becomes increasingly easier to go through this cycle efficiently, and with enough repetition, people start identifying with this loop and accept it as part of their identity and character. It becomes a core belief about who you think you are. And we can think back to the model of beliefs impacting thoughts, feelings, and actions, and impacting habits and character, and it's all on a loop that doesn't stop. If you feel like you're often stuck in negative emotions, it's not just the way you are, it's more like a habit that resulted from your beliefs. So simply changing the external environment by getting a new job or a promotion doesn't necessarily break the addiction to the negative emotions any more than someone addicted to drugs would be able to stop their cravings just by winning the lottery. When you think about it logically, most people, like if you're a drug addict and you win the lottery, the chances are greater of you dying than you curing your drug addiction by winning the lottery. Sooner or later, most people return to the baseline emotional state that is more aligned with their subconscious programming. It's the same deal that we had with people trying to lose weight or quit cigarettes. The main issue is their beliefs did not change. Despite the risk of side effects that range from dementia to premature death, drugs are still the medicine's go-to remedies for stress and anxiety. But we have to look at this logically, and if emotions like fear can be the trigger for the activation of the sympathetic nervous system and the expression of genes for disease, is it possible that peace-promoting emotions, the opposite of fear, emotions like love, joy, and gratitude, can be the remedy? A study 2012, 2014. Exercise, good nutrition, positive outlook on life, living in happiness and gratitude, being in service, and experiencing love, especially self-love, all enhance gene expression for a long and healthy life. We have an example of an orphanage in Romania, and this is a fascinating one. Obviously, what humans need is nurture in the form of love. And we have babies in orphanages that are kept in cribs and only provided food, but not one-on-one smiles and hugs. And these babies developed long-lasting developmental problems. A study in Romania done by Mary Carlson, a neurobiologist at Harvard Medical School, concluded that the lack of touching and attention in Romanian orphanages and poor quality daycare centers stunted the children's growth and adversely affected their behavior. A lack of socialization and communication between caregivers and institutionalized children resulted in profound behavioral dysfunctions, including a high incidence of autism and feral behavior. Feral behavior is basically children behaving as animals. Carlson, who studied 60 Romanian children from a few months to 3 years of age, measured their cortisol levels by analyzing samples of saliva. The more stressed a child was, as determined by the higher than normal levels of cortisol in its blood, the poorer the outcome for the child. Another study of these orphans found that some debilitating effects of early deprivation can be addressed with appropriate nurturing, especially if it's provided within a critical period of development. In this study, measurement of the EEG brain activity of institutionalized children showed much weaker signals than similarly aged children from the general population. However, this is the key point. When institutionalized infants were adopted into loving families before the age of 2, their EEG patterns and behavior were no different than those of typical children by the time they reached 8 years old. This is something that Bruce Lipton said, and he did a lot of experiments with cells, trying to figure out the impact of the environment on cells. This is what he says. When I provided a healthy environment for my cells, they thrived. When the environment was less than optimal, the cells faltered. When I adjusted the environment, these sick cells revitalized. What this means is, when you change your emotions, you change the expression of your genes because you're sending a new chemical signal to your DNA. Your DNA expression changes. For example, if your immune system has been subject to living in the emotions of stress for too long and has certain genes activated for inflammation and disease, you can turn on new genes for growth and repair, which switches off the expression of genes responsible for disease. The genes will begin to follow new instructions, the expression, which programs the body for growth, repair, and healing. In other words, through positive emotions like love, joy, and gratitude, you change the environment. And this is how you successfully recondition your body to a new mindset. How does this work? Just like we have the fight or flight response, we also have the opposite of it. It's called the rest and digest, or the relaxation response. And this is the opposite of the chronically elevated sympathetic nervous system. It's called, I'm not sure why it's not written here. Oh, yeah, it is. While a chronically elevated flight or fight response leads to disease, rest and digest response leads us back into ease. So the parasympathetic nervous system is the reset button that brings us back to a calm state after intense emotions. It releases chemicals that lower stress hormones and initiate the body's relaxation and recovery process. This is the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system activates when the threat is gone and when the recovery is supposed to take place. And you can think of the parasympathetic nervous system as a calming wave. When it's activated, the heart rate slows down, the blood pressure lowers, and the muscles relax. This allows the body to switch to a state of relaxation where it can focus on essential maintenance functions like digestion, immune response, and tissue repair. To conclude, the emotions are not just in our heads, they create a real biochemical change that ripple throughout the whole system, the body. By cultivating positive emotions and elevated states, we can influence our internal chemistry toward more balance and resilience, which supports both mental and physical health. Positive emotions like love, gratitude, and contentment activate the rest and digest response to the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes a sense of inner peace. Think of situations when you feel happy, safe, or connected, when you're spending time with the people you love, or doing something that you enjoy, or when you're just relaxing. All of this releases feel-good chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, the bonding hormone. The activation of the parasympathetic nervous system also plays a key role in the reversal of our addiction to stress-inducing emotions. Like any habit, we can break the addiction to negative emotions by creating new emotional and chemical patterns in the brain. By consciously creating positive emotional experiences, we can rewire those pathways, helping the brain break free from old patterns and find a new comfort zone of peace and positivity. This involves consciously shifting to positive emotions through practices like prayer, gratitude, mindfulness, compassion, spending time with loved ones, and even laughing. These are the activities that shift us away from the stress loop, and on a superficial level, they signal to the body that it's safe to relax. You're not under threat. You can laugh, enjoy, have fun. Study. When individuals raise their levels of optimism and deepen their social connections, they not only raise their level of happiness, but also dramatically improve every single business and educational outcome tested for. Now, this is an experiment and a study done by Dr. Joe Dispenza. It was conducted in one of his workshops. In a 4-day workshop in 2006 in Washington, they conducted a study on the effect that elevated emotions like joy, love, and gratitude have on the immune function. They took saliva from 117 test subjects at the start of the workshop and then again 4 days later. They measured IgA, which is immunoglobulin A, a protein marker for the strength of the immune system. IgA is an incredibly powerful chemical, one of the primary proteins responsible for healthy immune function and the internal defense system. It's constantly fighting a barrage of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other organisms that invade or are already living within the body's internal environment. This is the key sentence right here. It's so powerful that it's better than any flu shot or immune system booster you could possibly take. When it's activated, it's the primary internal defense system in the human body. When stress levels and cortisol go up, this lowers the levels of IgA, thereby compromising and down-regulating the immune system's expression of the gene that makes this protein. And this is perfectly connected to the example of the kids, the poor kids that that perceived more threat in the outside world. And this is why their immune system was down-regulated and compromised. They asked the study participants to move into an elevated emotional state such as love, joy, and gratitude for 10 minutes 3 times a day, and the results are amazing. The average IgA levels shot up by almost 50%, and now the normal range is from 37 to 87, but some people measured more than 100 milligrams per deciliter at the end of the workshop. Average cortisol levels dropped by 16.25%, and participants showed significant, measurable epigenetic changes without having any significant experience in their external environment, meaning nothing happened, they didn't win the lottery, and they became joyful or grateful for that. They just used their imagination and shifted to a state of gratitude, joy, and love within. By attaining states of elevated emotion, even for just a few days, their bodies began to believe that they were in a new environment, so they were able to signal new genes and change their genetic expression, like in this case, the expression of the immune system. This means that you might not need a pharmacy or an external substance to heal you. You have the power from within to upregulate the genes that make IgA within just a few days. And something as simple as moving into an elevated state of joy, love, inspiration, or gratitude for 5 to 10 minutes a day can produce significant epigenetic changes in your health and body. And this is crazy when you think about it. In one of Dr. Dispenza's workshops in 2017, this time, they measured the gene expression in 30 participants. And the results show that it is possible to significantly change the expression of 8 genes over the 4-day workshop just by changing the internal state, like in the previous example, to joy, love, and gratitude. And the functions of these genes that they measured are far-ranging. Their main functions are, for example, neurogenesis and growth of new neurons, protecting the body against aging, regulating cell repair, building cellular structure, eliminating the radicals and the consequences of oxidative stress, and also helping the bodies identify and eliminate cancer cells. So the question that we need to ask ourselves is, if the participants have changed their gene expression through the practice of elevated emotions in just 4 days, imagine what is possible if you practice for weeks, months, and years. Imagine if it's a lifestyle. All of this shows that we have a surprising amount of influence over how our genetic code is expressed. Your beliefs act like filters on a camera, changing how you see the world, and your biology adapts to those beliefs. So the way that you take care of yourself, the thoughts and the emotions that you nurture, the beliefs that you hold, habits that you build, and your resulting character actually shapes how your body and mind express themselves. And even more importantly, the very same genetic expression is then passed down to future generations, to your kids and the kids of your kids. Like, the implications are profound. After decades of research and study in epigenetics, here's the opinion of Bruce Lipton: you can live in a life of fear or live in a life of love. You have the choice. But I tell you that if you choose to see a world full of love, your body will respond by growing in health. If you choose to believe that you live in a dark world full of fear, your body's health will be compromised as you physiologically close yourself down in a protection response. When we change the way we perceive the world, that is, when we change our beliefs, we change the blood's neurochemical composition, which then initiates a complementary change in the body's cells. Okay, what's so special about elevated emotions besides the activation of the parasympathetic nervous system? In states of love or appreciation, our hearts beat in a smooth pattern. And this is called a state of heart coherence. It signals that the body and mind are working in harmony. HeartMath Institute, HMI, is a non-profit research and education organization that works to better understand the state of heart and brain coherence. Researchers at HMI began studying people's heart rhythms while they were feeling positive emotions like gratitude and love. They discovered that elevated emotions such as appreciation, joy, gratitude, and compassion can be observed as coherent patterns in the heart's rhythm. The heart's rhythm became incredibly smooth and organized. The coherent rhythm signals to the brain and the rest of the body that all is well, which creates a cascade of positive effects. And since the 90s, the HeartMath Institute has published hundreds of studies that show incredible benefits, and I actually recommend that you look into it. Maybe there's even thousands. I couldn't come to terms with the amount of studies that were done. The opposite was true of stressful feelings, which caused the heart rhythms to be incoherent and to appear jagged and irregular. And you can see in this graph the difference in the heart rhythm patterns when someone is in stressful feelings and incoherent heart rhythm pattern. And you can see the lower example is an example of heart coherence and elevated emotions like love, joy, and gratitude. The heart coherence is measured with heart rate variability, which is the variation of the heart's beat-to-beat intervals. And so it's not the heart rate, but it's the variation of the heart's beat-to-beat intervals. And today, with about 75% accuracy, science can predict what someone is feeling just by looking at the HRV. And the HRV can measure the flexibility of our heart and nervous system, as well as how well we balance our mental and emotional lives. Low level of HRV is associated with numerous medical conditions and is a strong predictor of future health problems, including all causes of mortality. I think that I read about that they can even accurately guess how old someone is just based on the HRV reading. The heart coherence doesn't just reflect in the heart, because the intervals between the beats of the heart are complex transmissions used to relay information to the brain and the entire body. Every emotion that we experience influences our heart rhythm, which gets communicated to the brain and the body through the central nervous system. So basically, heart coherence also plays a key role in the activation and harmonization of both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, or the relaxation response and the fight or flight response. And these two aspects of our nervous system are always working to maintain a state of balance within the body. From this state of balance, all systems of the body are working in harmony and no energy is wasted. It's a state of ease. The heart and the brain have more nerve connections to each other than any other system in the body. We have been led to believe that the brain reigns over our biology. However, in a fetus, the heart begins beating before the brain is even formed at about 3 weeks, while the electrical activity of its brain doesn't even begin until around the 5th or 6th week. In fact, our hearts send more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart, which means that our heart state has a significant influence on how we think and how our brain works. The heart sends signals to the brain, helping it to produce calming chemicals like dopamine and serotonin, which helps you think clearly and feel balanced. This is why when you're in a good mood, everything feels easier. You're more focused, you have more energy, and you're able to make better decisions. If there's a disharmony in our heart rhythms, the opposite is true. In response to chaotic heart rhythms, the brain becomes very incoherent, which stifles our ability to think and create. Then what happens is we feel out of balance, on the edge, anxious and unfocused, and incoherence is brought on by emotions that trigger the state of stress and therefore the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. HeartMath Institute did a lot of interventions and studies that have facilitated in health improvements in patients with hypertension, heart irregularities, autoimmune disorders, sleep disorders, drug and alcohol addictions, anger issues, heart failure, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, anxiety disorders, depression, PTSD, ADD, ADHD, and eating disorders. Most of this stuff is connected with the sympathetic nervous system. And they developed a couple of self-regulation techniques. I think I found 5 or 6, but the basis of all of them is exactly the same. An example is, or the essence is, the quick coherence technique. Step 1, focus your attention in the area of the heart. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area, breathing a little slower and deeper than usual. Suggestion: inhale 5 seconds, exhale 5 seconds. or whatever works for you. Make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. And another suggestion, try to re-experience the feeling you have for someone you love, a pet, a special place, an accomplishment, or focus on a feeling of calm or ease. Like all of the self-regulation techniques are the same. The only difference is what you do when you enter a state of elevated feelings and heart coherence. In one technique, you're asking yourself a question like, what am I supposed to do? Or in another one, you're radiating the energy of elevated state outwards. You're projecting it into the world. But the main thing is dropping into the elevated state. And honestly, I just know this as heartfulness meditation. They just slapped on some different names to it, but heartfulness meditation is essentially focusing on your heart, and through this focus, entering into an elevated state, or into a state of elevated emotions. And heartfulness meditation is amazing. I sincerely love heartfulness meditation. And it's the basis for some of the other stuff that we're going to talk about in some of the later chapters when it comes to the defragmentation and purification of the beliefs that we do have. But to move on, with the stuff that they used, they did many studies, and they found significant improvements in cognitive functioning and self-regulatory capacity. And now we have some examples. We have an example of 41 fighter pilots, and they found significant correlation between higher levels of performance and heart coherence, as well as lower levels of frustration. They also did a study with PTSD soldiers returning from Iraq, and they found that relatively brief periods of heart coherence training resulted in significant improvements in the ability to self-regulate, along with a wide range of cognitive benefits. They also found that the self-regulation techniques increases parasympathetic activity, which makes sense because the parasympathetic is activated through elevated emotions, and results in significant reductions in cortisol, or the stress response, and increase in DHEA over a 30-day period. And DHEA is something that supports resilience to stress and promotes parasympathetic dominance by mitigating cortisol's effects. In a study, 30 participants practiced self-regulation techniques using them daily for 1 month. I presume it's similar like in Joe Dispenza's studies, like 10 minutes a day, probably, maybe 3 times a day. And the significant changes in hormonal balance correlated with the significant improvements in emotional health and reductions in stress, anxiety, burnout, and guilt, along with increases in caring and vigor. There was a 100% average increase in DHEA, and 23% decrease in cortisol. So after just 1 month, the participants were able to increase like the main factor in stress resilience and parasympathetic activation by 100%. And they decreased the stress response through or in the form of cortisol by 23%. I mean, this stuff is supposed to make you think a bit. Not only that, but they have several studies that show significantly lowered blood pressure and stress measures. I'm not familiar with blood pressure issues, but there's 2 types of blood pressure that's measured, systolic and diastolic. And the improvements that were achieved with the heart coherence technique resulted in, or is the equivalent of a 40-pound weight loss. and is twice the size of the average reduction seen with, for example, a low salt diet or exercise training. Basically, moving into elevated states and elevated emotions achieved better results than like participants losing 20 kilograms, 25 kilograms of fat, which, as you know, has crazy benefits and effects on your health. In the same study, the patients experienced significant reductions in distress and depression, concurrent with improvements in work performance-related parameters following the intervention. You can see the graph and the changes expressed in the blood pressure through the coherence technique after 3 months. An example with diabetes, with heart coherence techniques led to improved overall quality of life and glycemic regulation, which correlated with the use of self-regulation techniques. 22 patients with type 1 or type 2 diabetes participated in just 2 days of training. And hemoglobin, A1C, cholesterol, and triglycerides, as well as blood pressure, were assessed with the measures of stress, psychological status, and quality of life before and 6 months after the training. The results: there were significant reductions in psychological symptomology and negative emotions, including anxiety, depression, anger, and distress, and significant increases in peacefulness, social support, and vitality, as well as reductions in sleeplessness and fatigue. And you can see all of the differences and the different aspects. We can see the overall quality of life score, like pre the exercises and post the study. And you can see post study, it was the overall quality of life like moved beyond the high level of satisfaction with life. We even have an improved cognitive function. Several studies have shown that increased levels of heart rhythm coherence are associated with significant improvements in cognitive performance. And we saw significant outcomes observed in discrimination and reaction time experiments, as well as more complex domains of cognitive function, including memory and academic performance. In terms of healthier cognitive and emotional functioning, significant reductions in stress, depression, anxiety, anger, hostility, burnout, and fatigue, and increases in caring, contentment, gratitude, peacefulness, resilience, and vitality have been measured across diverse populations. As an example, in high school students, they practiced the self-regulation techniques for over a 4-month period, and their resting heart rate variability was significantly increased, and the pattern of the heart rate variability was significantly more coherent. I'm not sure if I'm going to state this, but you can see in the graph with test anxiety, the before and after, and how significant the differences in the test anxiety before and after participating and implementing the heart coherence techniques. And also the grades, like with the reduction in the test anxiety, we can see almost the exact same correlation in the grades that the students received. The improvement of grades that came with the reduction in the test anxiety. We have another example with ADHD. A study of middle school students with ADHD showed a wide range of significant improvements in short and long-term memory, ability to focus, and significant improvements in behaviors both at home and at school. You can see some of the graphs without going so much into it. Memory improvements, we can see education, like again, the effect that the reduction in test anxiety has on the test performance, like test performance increases overall. We have a study with law enforcement officers for 16 weeks, 4 months before and after the implementation of heart coherence techniques. And you can see like a reduction in sleeplessness, in anxiety, in body aches, in indigestion, and yeah. And you can also see a whole range of other stuff like global negative emotion drops, anger drops, distress drops, depression, sadness, fatigue. Everything dropped, and then on the spectrum of positive emotion, peacefulness, and vitality, that increased. So this is 4 months before and after. You can see the percentages. The results are crazy. Another crazy study is moms of children with autism or ADHD. These were just 14 continuously stressed mothers. And they participated in practical session to increase their heart coherence. And adjacent to the practical session, the experimental group got 4 training sessions, 30 minutes each, in 2 weeks on how to implement heart coherence in stressful situations at home. The mothers have been asked to practice the process, a combination of heart coherence technique, 5 times a day for half a minute to optimize the process. Half a minute. Crazy. The results of the practice show that all the mothers can double their heart coherence within half an hour. And this effect is not maintained over a period of 2 weeks without training. However, after the training that came with the homework, the effect has been maintained for a period of 2 weeks. Not only the increased brain coherence, but also a significant improvement of other variables in the physiological, physical, emotional, and cognitive domains prove that training leads to stress reduction. A potential indirect effect of the effect of the more approach directed state. This is wrong. A potential indirect effect of the elevated state of the mothers. Elevated state of the mothers is noticed in the situations at home where the amount of tempers of the restless children have been decreased. If you're thinking how this is possible, this is like the next chapter. We will take a look at this in the next chapter.